Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's day 5 of the first Global Gender and Migration Forum, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's closing celebration art show titled Gender Justice Beyond Borders, Our Collective Fight. I'm Dr. Lara Sorki, founder and executive director of the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice, the convener of this inaugural forum, and I have the honor to facilitate this closing event today. I would like to thank our partners, NYU Liberal Studies, and especially Dean Julie Mostov and Dr. Christina Dragomir, as well as Vera Panovich for making this event happen. So thank you very much for hosting us and for collaborating with us on this. Today is about coming together to envision gender justice beyond borders, figuratively and literally through creative expression, and to reflect what lies ahead in terms of migration and gender. The event is designed as an open iterative space headlined by artists Alex Strada and Eliane Pérez, and featuring also Ranji Ukwa Avori, who you will all meet and I'll introduce in just a few moments. I would like to reiterate here again that as part of this open and iterative space, we invite all of you here and those that are joining us online to share your thoughts, however you would like, through creative expression on what gender justice beyond borders means to you. So if you feel inspired and motivated as we go through this session to share this as a format, we're happy to add you to the lineup. We certainly have space for that. I will stop here for now before I then introduce our artist, and we'll pass it to Dr. Christina Dragomir for a few words and to Dean Julie Mostov for some welcoming remarks. Thank you again for being here.
Hello, everyone, and I just want to thank you very much for coming here today. This is really such a pleasure to have all of you, especially our students, since this is right before your spring break, and we're also competing with the really nice weather outside. So I very much appreciate you being here and for being a part of this. It was really great to get to work with Lara Suzanne and with her center, and it's really great to be a part of this closing day. It's my pleasure right now to introduce Dean Mostov, who was our supporter in all of this. It has been really great to have her support, both academic. She participated with us in another event, but also, of course, in terms of the logistics of it. So please, if you didn't do this already, please feel free to get some food and enjoy that as well. You already know Dean Mostov. She doesn't need a really big introduction, but you know that her work on soft borders, transnational citizenship, and gender is very well known. So it's really such a great pleasure to have had her with us today. So please join me in welcoming Dean Mostov. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Christina, who really herself an amazing scholar and outstanding teacher, and somebody who has really encouraged our students to think beyond borders. I just want to say a few things first to welcome you all to New York University and to Liberal Studies. Liberal Studies is an interdisciplinary college that defines ourselves with 3 words: global, interdisciplinary, and engaged. And truly, that is what we are. We have no disciplinary departments, but we work across those borders and try to encourage our students to look at the world from many different perspectives at the complex place that it is, and to be engaged in the communities in which they study and live. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to welcome you here and for us to be a part of this important inaugural week. I so appreciate the work you're doing. It's not easy. And that's why I think it's important that we're here together tonight to celebrate. When we begin to examine the violence at the border, the ways in which gender has in many ways frames the challenges and the closure that we see in immigration stories, migration stories at the borders and beyond, we sometimes can be bogged down in the horrors, because indeed there are the violence, the tragedy, the trauma, the trails that people have to follow, the lives that they've left behind, the lives that are shortened, and the engagement with those who dehumanize and demonize those on the move. And so many times it's very easy to be so frustrated. I often feel myself, when I begin to do some of this research where I'm listening, I feel an enormous rage at the way in which migrants and people or forced or voluntary, people seeking asylum, people trying to find better lives for themselves, for their children and their family, and the way in which their travels have been shortened, or their lives are disregarded, denied, and undermined. And that can really feel frustrating. And I know all of you have participated in the pain and the suffering, but at the same time, we need to celebrate the survival. We need to celebrate the collaborative spirit, the solidarity that we do see across borders. And yesterday I listened to a talk on, criminalizing solidarity. And when you hear this, you're so frustrated, but then you think, I'm not going to focus on the criminalizing, I'm going to focus on the solidarity, which is so meaningful and which makes the difference. And all of us here, because we are here, are a part of that and part of the celebration of survival. And with artists who are really, in many cases, the ones who sing the songs of survival, of solidarity, and help us to celebrate the journeys of so many people. All of us, in fact, have histories of migration, and to celebrate those histories, it's really important to have the works of artists. So I'm so pleased that we are able to participate in this and to share in your work and in your celebration. So thank you again for letting us be a part of this, and I look forward to hearing all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you again for collaborating with us on this important event to close out the first Global Gender and Migration Forum. We will now begin with the art show portion of the event. And the way that this is organized is that we will have 20-minute presentations followed by 10 minutes Q&A for each of the artists with us today. And the first artist that I have the pleasure of introducing is Alex Strada. Alex Strada is a multimedia artist and educator based in New York City. Through film, video, installation, sound and orality, performance, and public art, her socially engaged projects explore collectivity, critical legal studies, and political transformation. Transdisciplinary collaboration is at the core of her practice. Since 2022, she has served as the inaugural public artist in residence with the New York City Department of Homeless Services and the Department of Cultural Affairs, where she is working on a new collaborative public art commission while developing art programming in shelters throughout the city and mutual aid initiatives that serve people experiencing homelessness, including asylum seekers. Her work has been supported through fellowships from the Graham Foundation, Artadia, NYFA, NYSCSA, Rema Hordman Foundation, and the Foundation of Contemporary Arts. Alex is also an assistant professor of art at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University. As part of today's event, Alex will reflect on her work as the Department of Homeless Services Public Artist in Residence and share her in-progress collaborative project, Public Address, where people living and working in New York City shelters are invited to write log entries directed towards the New York City public. Thank you, Alex, for being here with us today, and we'll make sure that your presentation is up and running.
Okay.
Join me in welcoming.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. So we can pull that presentation up, but I have been the artist in residence with the New York City Department of Homeless Services since 2022. Prior to that, I had a lot of experience teaching art in shelters in different capacities, and of course, DHS, Department of Homeless Services, DHS. I'll say DHS moving forward. When you start to work in the city, you use acronyms all the time, and I realize I sound like the people that I first really didn't know what they were talking about when I started my residency now. But in any case, DHS has changed a dramatic amount, from 2022 to the present day, with what I think is erroneously referred to as the migrant crisis, right? Where people are coming in mass, often through New York, through our shelter system. And why is that? Why are people coming to New York through the shelter system? Who knows why? Why here and not people coming in mass in the same amount to other cities in the US? Anyone know? So we are the only city in the United States that has a right to shelter. Does that sound somewhat familiar? So we're the only city in the US that guarantees a bed to anyone who needs it, regardless of immigration status. And this has been a law that's been in place since 1981, under a decision that was made by the New York Supreme Court, the Callahan decision. And what it essentially means is that there are certain qualities that have to be accounted for in terms of the type of shelter, but really if someone needs a place to stay, the city is legally obligated to give it to that person. There have been many challenges around the right to shelter in recent months. And today there was actually a massive decision that was made after Mayor Adams has been working to try and dismantle the right to shelter. As you might have heard, migrants who are entering shelter when they're single adults, they have 30 days in a shelter before they have to reapply. They have to get on that long line often. Sometimes people have to sleep outside or in waiting rooms before being relocated to a new shelter site. For families, it's 60 days. So the right to shelter, however important it is and however critical it is for New Yorkers and US citizens, the rules are not exactly equal when it comes to non-citizens. Any questions about the right to shelter? I just want to have that as that's a kind of fundamental part of I think understanding why we are in what again is called the migrant crisis. So when I started my residency at DHS, something that I realized was that there was a big gap between the actual labor of people working in shelter and the lived experiences of people who are unhoused living in the New York City shelter system and public perception of homelessness. There's big division between those two things. Oftentimes New Yorkers, when they even think of homelessness, think of street homelessness, think of people who are not living in shelter. About 3,000 people live on our streets and do not want to live in shelter for a variety of reasons. And at this moment in time, around 90,000 people live in the DHS shelter system. So I was on a panel discussion a couple of weeks ago with a shelter provider, and they helped clarify this really beautifully when saying, if you are on a subway car and you identify someone who you think is or can tell are street homeless, you might think, that's the only person on the train who's having that experience of homelessness, when in reality, there could be 15 other people on your train that, don't fulfill the stigma that you might have of homelessness. So I started to work towards this project where I wanted to try and address that gap between perception and lived experience. And as an artist, I became really fascinated by these logbooks. So inside shelter, DHS staff have to write down by hand at the end of their shift what happened in order to catch the next person coming on shift up, similar to what nurses often have to do in hospitals. And I was fascinated by this insistence on handwriting, and thought that there was almost a kind of formal beauty to these different hand-woven accounts. And I decided to use this as a form to invite people living in shelter to actually reflect on their own experiences or reflect on something that they wish the greater New York City public understood. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see this is a picture from a logbook writing session at a shelter, the Auburn Family Residence in Brooklyn. And when I invite people to participate, I give everyone the same prompt. It says, the experience of homelessness is often unseen or misunderstood by the greater New York City public. You're invited to use this log as a public address to share a story or reflection from your unique perspective as a DHS client or staff member. Logs can include drawings. You're welcome to respond in any language. Responses can be anonymous. And when I work on this, particularly in asylum sites, I'm often working with people who speak many, many different languages. And I will have the assistance of different staff on site or the city's language line, which is a city-run initiative where you're able to have like a live translator on the phone, kind of translating in real time. And what I thought would be helpful or meaningful rather in the context of this event would just be to share some of the responses that I've gathered so far. And then I'll talk with you a little bit about where this project is going and how it's going to manifest. And you can keep an eye out for it. It's going to be actually on view throughout the city in a couple of months. But I'm going to read a translation of a submission by a DHS client who is an asylum seeker. This is written originally in Spanish, and I'll read the translation aloud in English. My name is Jennifer. I'm from Venezuela, and I migrated to this country in search of a better future for me and my family. Getting here wasn't easy at all, and the trip, La Travesía, and everything we had to go through is something so taxing that I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But we made it, thank God. This country received us very well, even though we broke their laws by entering illegally, and they gave us accommodation in this hotel where we've been for several months. There's been sadness and joy, but we are moving forward. We have already been able to adapt, and soon we will move out to be better and for the well-being of our children, since they need better nutrition. They miss mommy's food. And then where it says number 1 with the image of the tent, the drawing says, we're sleeping in tents in the jungle. The river almost carried us away. Number 2, on the train, quote, the beast, where we had 4 days of hunger, sadness, and sun. And then beneath that sketch of the train, Jennifer writes, every person should know that the experiences on the trip are different and it will not go well or badly for everyone. Arriving in this country is already an achievement, and it gives us hope to work and achieve our goals. The fact that this country has a law that provides shelter to migrants and has helped many of us in this beginning, since we have somewhere to stay, a roof, and certain foods that have helped us a lot. And this is another response gathered at an asylum site by an anonymous contributor. It's not easy to start over, but our hope is for a better tomorrow. The law is a good thing, but at the same time sad, because entire families are filled with resentment towards those of us who are in these shelters. It affects us as human beings, knowing that there are people who want us out, and what hurts our souls are innocent and defenseless children. This is a response by a DHS staff member, because as I mentioned, I invite both staff and clients, people living in shelter, to participate. And this gives a little bit more insight into the right to shelter. So I thought it might be interesting to share. The right to shelter law in New York City hasn't personally impacted my life, but definitely has influenced my work. The main takeaway I have about the guarantee is that it is a good law to have on paper, but is more complicated and nuanced in practice. For example, in order to be eligible for shelter, you have to be able to take care of yourself, i.e. feed, dress, bathe, move around. You can't have certain medical conditions, needs that require more care than shelter can provide. You can't be a danger to yourself or to others. While I understand that the reasons for these criteria limits, it creates a tension when someone being discharged from the hospital, jail, or other facility might not have anywhere appropriate to go. And because there is a right to shelter, it is assumed they do. This can result in people being shuttled back from shelter to hospital, or sometimes being left on the street. Or someone may have been healthy at the beginning and slowly worsened in shelter, and then have trouble leaving. While there is a right to shelter, there isn't a right to housing. Although the vast majority of people in shelter will eventually get housing and go on to live independently, it's much more of a challenge for others. If someone is undocumented, they may not have full Medicaid and cannot go to assisted living or afford a nursing home, and may not have family support or speak English. If they have a substance use disorder or serious mental illness, health condition, or a history of violence, nursing homes may reject them, and they may have trouble finding housing that is willing to accept them. They may be at a shelter that is understaffed and don't get the help they need to apply for and find supportive housing. Overall, more cross-section collaboration is needed between hospitals, shelter systems, schools, state agencies, and there needs to be a willingness to admit that there are many people who are not being served and potentially harmed by our systems, and that we need to work together to find a solution. So that's just a little bit more context also about the right to shelter and the limits that exist for New Yorkers and new arrivals and US citizens, non-citizens, undocumented people, all alike are subject to the same promise, but there are many limitations to that promise. And this is just one more response. My name is Jasmine, and I'm a case manager at Casa Esperanza since 5/26/21. I take pride in my work since I too have been in the shelter system. No matter who you are or where you come from, everyone deserves to have a place called home. So I've been gathering these responses for quite a while. Over 200 people have participated, which has been a really amazing experience. The desire to participate has far exceeded my expectations. And part of what I've also been doing is running arts classes in shelters at the same time, but that's separate from this project explicitly. This image is on the screen here to share with you a little bit about what I plan to do with those collected log entries. So elements of the log entries or shorter log entries in full are going to be screen printed onto New York City Department of Transportation signs. So these kinds of parking signs that we're used to seeing, I'm working with the Department of Transportation in their printing house to be able to transform the log entries into this into this material. Why do you think I would be interested in that kind of material? Why do you think that would make sense for this? Yeah.
Well, the immediate thought, looking at the mass of restrictions we have on the signs on the right, would be all the little nuances of accessing a right or accessing a certain resource. Because as we saw earlier, you may have a right to shelter, but do you have a right to assistance if you are disabled? Is that right afforded? Is there limitations placed on it depending on who you are or what you need to do?
Absolutely. Anyone else want to add to that? Why this material, that seemed like a appropriate material choice? Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of obvious, but it's like, if you don't drive, you're walking, and if you're not walking, you're taking the subway or taking the bus, so you see these signs everywhere anyway, so it just, I see as much more public accessible sometimes on like social media or other digital means, because you're always outside anyway, so it forces you to think about like even how your like physical journeys are manifesting in these ways and crossing with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe just adding on to that, materially, they have a kind of authority. And part of what I'm interested in doing in this project is thinking about how to center the voices of people who have participated in the project, whose voices are often kind of chronically erased from larger narratives, and particularly when we talk about homelessness. Homelessness is often spoken about as a monolith, and it is not. I mean, it is unbelievably complex why one person is experiencing homelessness. One person's reasons are radically different than the next person who's sleeping in the same site. So, but nonetheless, we have a very kind of limited discourse, I think, about talking about homelessness for many different reasons. But I'll mention that what I'm also planning to do is then use these signs, which are going to be distributed throughout the 5 boroughs, and also use them almost as shingles. So they're going to form different structures that are going to intervene in public sites throughout the 5 boroughs to create in-depth kind of sites of listening and engagement and sites of temporary respite in a city that increasingly has fewer and fewer kind of public spaces of collective gathering and engagement. And those will be activated through various workshops and programs in collaboration with the Department of Homeless Services and the Department of Cultural Affairs. And people's responses will also be shared on Link NYCs and bus stops and taxi TV. So anyway, I'm sharing with you a project that is not yet completed. So I'm treating this almost like a studio visit. This is what I'm in the throes of doing. But I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share it with you all, and grateful to be able to bring in some of the voices of our neighbors into the discussion here tonight. So thank you for listening. Have a little discussion. I can answer questions.
Yes, we will now move into the Q&A portion. Sit down, and the floor is open for questions or anything that you might want to comment on. So please feel free to go.
Alex, thank you so much for sharing. This is phenomenal and so important. I didn't know all the nuance. I mean, I knew there wasn't a monolith, of course, but it's wonderful to get even just scratch the surface on how deep it is. I'm curious in the representation of these entries, since they're gonna be in like things that people don't spend much time reading, you know, like, I mean, this may work, but like I'm saying, like the buses and those stories, are you keeping them as the original, like how you showed them, or is there like how are you navigating the lack of attention that we have nowadays with the the nuances that come from these entries?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a big challenge. I mean, I think materially, I'm interested in staying faithful to the handwritten component of the works, and so I think however, when there are just individual signs scattered throughout the city, rather than having dense blocks of text, I am already starting to do this. It will have to be like excerpts from people's responses. And then these larger sculptural places will be sites for deeper long form engagement. And ultimately, I'm working with the not just the Department of Cultural Affairs, but also this organization called the Storefront for Art and Architecture to create a logbook in the end where all of the responses can live collectively. But the idea is to try and attempt, that's the thing with art, is that there's no, like, you try something, you put it out in the world, and there's always a lot of room for things to operate in the way in which you anticipate and don't. Like, that's something I talk about with my students all the time. It's like, how can we also just we have to embrace that. And I think it's an attempt. It's an attempt to invite people to think more deeply about these, about homelessness, migration, asylum seeking, but it will reach certain viewers and it will inevitably not reach others. You know, that's also that as an artist, you also sometimes have to come to terms with that. You know, there's so many barriers that even prevent someone from ever entering a contemporary art museum, the place where most of our work usually exists, you know. Admission or lack of interest or feeling like I don't know how to understand that work and unpack it on its own terms, you know, but you kind of persevere anyway. So that's my long answer to your question.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments on other people right here, Christina?
Alex, this is fantastic work. So thank you very much for sharing it with us and for doing this for our city and for the people who are undergoing all of these experiences. And thank you very much for challenging the term of migrant crisis that is way too often vehiculated and thrown around at different levels, and people are just mindlessly engaging it without understanding the power that it has of creating and furthering the crisis
Yeah.
by the very term itself, right? So I really love the fact that you are going to take this into the city. I'm wondering if you have a thought about, like, when we see it, we will know that this is a part of a larger project. Do you have a recurring theme, or did they work with this? And another comment that I had was that I'm really impressed that certain institutions in the city are supporting this. So I'm very happy that this is actually taking place, especially within this larger context that we are.
Of course, yeah, I mean, I'm also grateful, but it hasn't been without challenges. So I should state that clearly. I mean, I think again, when I started this residency when I started working at DHS in summer of 2022, it was a very different landscape than it is today. But to DHS's credit, there's been a certain attitude of, if you want to work with us, we want to work with you, because I think that particularly that sector of city government, DHS calls itself the safety net of the safety net. They often have to kind of account for structural failures in other aspects of the city. And because homelessness is so stigmatized, even that extends also to people who work on this subject. And, you know, in the wake of COVID, when we had an essential worker day parade throughout the city, DHS wasn't invited, which is so kind of hard to fathom, but like, you know, that they weren't invited for whatever reason. So all of that to say, I've had to kind of learn what it means to work with this kind of complicated agency. And at one point, my production budget, as DHS's budget in general, was just cut by quite a lot of money. So I had to figure out how to then scramble and fill that void. And so much of most of this project has been uncompensated labor for myself. And I probably wouldn't be able to do it in the depths of the ways in which I am if I wasn't also a full-time professor and, you know, having course releases and arguing with my dean why it's really important that I need this time. But all of that being said, like yes, there has been support, but it's not something that was charted out in any clear way. And it continues to have different kinds of
Maybe your
challenges.
story also needs to be locked in.
I mean, the other part of your question though is about like the visual,
Yeah.
like how to create that kind of visual continuity. I think that it's going to be really important to use the same kind of like visual structure so that there is in terms of how the page appears and translates to these signs, and for there to be frankly enough of them that people start to see them with enough frequency that you think, oh wait, I saw that, you know, when I was on 59th Street. And part of what's going to be important as well is where they get placed, because we have this right to shelter, but there are deep disproportionate placements in terms of shelter density throughout the city. So the vast majority of shelters are in the South Bronx and East Brooklyn. In this neighborhood, very few shelters. Upper West Side, a neighborhood that has such a deep organized kind of NIMBY presence, I think there's 2 shelters, Upper East Side 0, all of Staten Island 3, and then in a community district in the South Bronx, in 20 square blocks, there will be like 37 shelters. So I do have a map that I didn't include in my PowerPoint, but I've also been kind of mapping and keeping track of those inequities, and that's going to inform also where these pieces are placed and what the kind of tone of the log entry is for a given location, if that makes sense. Like in the South Bronx, in that community district that I'm mentioning, it's going to be more about like gratitude for the right to shelter. And if a few of these were to be along the High Line, it might be more around destigmatizing homelessness and inviting people to think about it as not a monolithic thing. So yeah, that's such a long-winded answer to your question, but yes, those are all the things that are kind of I'm stewing at the moment.
I think, yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, and also to note that after we have our second and also our third contributor for today, we still have more time to mingle to follow up on some of the questions. So maybe we'll take both of them right now and then we'll answer. Please go ahead.
So a brief, more boring logistical question, I suppose. You spoke of the diversity of experiences that a lot of migrants have in coming here and ending up in the shelter system. Ultimately, that's some of the examples that we saw. And I was wondering how many come from different borders of the United States and how they end up in New York specifically, just in terms of the systems of logistics that bring.
Great question.
And maybe we'll take the second one right now. Yeah, please go ahead.
I was curious about, and it's semi follow-up to your previous response, but when people kind of see the different postings around the city and they kind of notice, oh, I saw that over there as well, and their interest kind of peaked, will there be any way for them to look for more information online? Like, is there like a website, a hashtag or something that will
Yeah.
go along?
There'll be a QR code, like kind of very like not detracting, but on the back. I have to figure out exactly what that means, but yes, I think there has to be a way in which to even have a map and understand the locations of the works. And to answer your question, maybe you all recall that in 2022, Governor Abbott started busing migrants to New York. And Mayor Adams at the time said, yes, bring whoever you want here. So that busing has continued, but that's not that is not the majority of how people are getting here. And I should also say that the amount of asylum seekers that are coming are not solely from Central and South America. It's really global. So I have met with people from often Central and South America, but Russia, a lot of people coming from Russia, a lot of people coming from Ukraine, a lot of people coming from Haiti. That's probably even going to increase. Many people coming from Western Africa. And it's really, again, it's not even monolithic in terms of who's coming here. Turkey. And I will say there's migration that's happening across state borders. So I have met with a number of people who are thinking about particularly gender justice, who are trans and coming to New York and using the right to shelter law in order to resettle here. There's a really wonderful shelter that I partnered with called Marsha's House that's explicitly for LGBTQ youth, where I've met with a number of trans people coming from families that didn't accept them in other parts of the US and just took a bus to New York and ended up in the shelter system and hopefully won't be there for long. But the right to shelter I think is a very good thing. I want it to keep being expanded and not just exist here, but the way that it exists here is really a powerful thing for people who are fleeing horrific circumstances. And we owe a lot more to the people that are coming through our system than they get. New Yorkers and non-New Yorkers, global citizens alike. Like we owe people so much more than they are getting with our bare bones shelter system as well.
Well, would like to thank Alex for your presentation. We'll have more time towards the end of today's celebration to talk about this, and also if we would then like to talk more about it as well. I now have the honor of introducing our second artist. You could just wait a second, Eliana. I have a whole spiel for you to introduce you. Our second headliner artist is Eliane Pérez, and I have so many things to say about Eliana, and you will see why in just a few moments. But one thing I must say before reading your impressive bio is that you created my favorite art piece. So Eliana was a student of mine at Parsons, the New School for Design. And when I actually first started my PhD studies, I was a teaching assistant. I taught global issues in design. And every time when I entered the classroom, I was very impressed by just the immense talent of the students. In welcoming the class, I said, I know about global issues, you know about art and design, let's do this. That was the spirit, and I actually taught at Parsons for 3 years. My first 3 years of teaching were at Parsons. And so here we are, so this is a very special kind of reunion for Eliana and I as an art show together as part of the Global Forum that I curated. So there's younger me, and I still have the original. So here we are. Now let me get to your bio, Eliana. Eliane Pérez is a Dominican artist based in New York. She received her master's degree in fine arts from the New York Academy of Art and her bachelor's degree from the School of Design Altos del Carbón and Parsons, the New School of Fine Arts and Illustration. Eliana has participated in group exhibits in places like Christie's Auction in New York, Altos del Carbón Gallery in the Dominican Republic, Miami Art Fair in Florida, and Spazio EV in Venice, Italy. Eliana is also a faculty member at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, where she teaches figurative drawing to the fine art major students, and also teaches art around the world with the hopes of sharing with people art resources where they're not available or not as developed. In her presentation, Eliana will discuss the intersection of gender and migration through her artwork, sharing how her own personal experiences as a migrant woman in New York City have influenced her creative processes. She will also touch on her role as a mentor at the Fashion Institute of Technology, where she helps support and guide young migrants pursuing careers in the art world. Through her presentation, Eliana will shed light on the unique challenges and opportunities faced by migrant artists in a diverse and dynamic city like New York. Eliana, it's a pleasure to have you here today with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Laura, that was amazing. I think I was about to shed a tear. It has been a lot, many things, and many years of creating, of pushing myself and going through many lengths. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So officially, hello, everybody. My name is Eliane Pérez, and I am a New York-based artist. I was actually born in Mexico, so part of being even more migrant than that, right? But raised in the Dominican Republic. My parents are a result of this whole contemporary or global migrant activity. From my father's side, I am Lebanese. My grandmother's parents used to be Lebanese, and they moved to the Dominican Republic. There's a big community of Lebanese people there. And then from my mother's side, I am also Puerto Rican, which keep us Latinos, but also Spanish. As you know, or maybe some of you know, Dominican Republic is a big melting pot as well. And throughout the times, we created our own cultural
our own cultural nationality and what represents us. So that's why we kind of feel like one single thing. But yeah, I came to New York City in 2014 as a result of an amazing scholarship I earned that covered my full studies in Parsons. And I couldn't be any luckier and happier to have that opportunity. So I'm gonna guess I just click on next.
Yes.
Perfect.
Should work.
But my artistic studies started at Altos de Chavon, which is in Dominican Republic. And that's a very beautiful entity where I learned the basics of art, and I pursued my artistic beginnings. And these are really old drawings and creations. I did old studies, homeworks. As you can see, they're very beautiful. They are very powerful. And when I started and when everything started, I thought I was in a really good spot. I feel really confident with my artistic creations. And honestly, I thought that there was nothing else I should have learned in those 2 years of learning art. And, as this is a really beautiful, simple drawing of Altos de Chavon, I was very intrigued by lines, by creating beautiful sceneries of things that I really liked. I studied a little bit of perspective, a little bit of line weight, composition, and even digital softwares to develop my own artistic language. It's a little washy, but this was part of my thesis show. At the time, I was so focused on being a fine artist, and it was something that I really loved, and creating art to express myself was something that made me really happy. But then when I went to Parsons, I fell in love with all these opportunities that America has. And I said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna pursue an illustration career at Parsons. I would like to finish my fine art, my bachelor's degree as an illustrator. And that's what I did. I went to Parsons, and as soon as I get there, I started drawing whatever I see, as I was used to do in New York. I mean, in the Dominican Republic. And as you can see, I drew all my professors. And that's where I met Lara as well. Lara was so encouraging. She was very kind. This is my turn to talk about her. She was the type of person that I needed at a time where I had no one around with me. She understood me in such a nice way that I felt I had comfort at Parsons. It was too much for someone like me, transferring to a school in a different country that educational expectations are completely different and that have different standards, right? That has different standards. I completely felt overwhelmed. And Lara was there to help me with all these papers and the essays and how to create them. I felt constantly going to specific places at Parsons in which I was being aided in order to have a better grammatical, understanding, writings and things like that. And then throughout my Parsons career, I decided to learn a lot of things, not just reading and writing, right? But I decided to learn also about how to create and different languages in the art world. I fell in love with animation, so I took some animation classes. I fell in love with children's book. As you can see, those are a bunch of characters that are based on me. And I posted on Instagram and on many social medias my activities or the things I went through, like, I don't know, having a really hard time reading papers or experiencing my first winter ever in my life. Being excited to be an illustrator, digital illustration as well. There was so many things to talk about. I also try to do so many artwork that represents my country and things that were happening at the moment in my country. I threw myself in different live drawing sessions. Do you guys know the Society of Illustrators? Do you happen to know that place? Well, it's a beautiful place. It's a community where illustrators gathered. They make amazing fairs, art fairs based in illustration and narrative creations. And they also have open drawing sessions, either nudes or costume, well, models wearing costumes. And I used to hang out in those costume, sessions. I also worked for different companies as a graphic designer. As you can see, this was one of the products I did for them, stickers for the products, depending on the season. And many illustrations, that illustration over there of the Statue of Liberty, I did for Lara's class. It was just happening to talk about how justice was not having a good time with the things that were happening in that time, facing very hard times for New York City and for everybody, I'm assuming. Then I fell in a great opportunity of going to Disney. I have this great grant of going to with a group of Parsons students to visit the park and learn about the cultural aspects that it has. I don't know if you guys have been in Disney in Florida, but they have always a lot of changes of culture when it comes to Epcot. If you go to the animal kingdom, there are a lot of animals in there. So our job was to have a reportage drawing project. And that reporter's drawing project, it was just to draw things that were around the city, try to get beautiful compositions of the things that were in there in Disney. And every single thing I did, I took advantage of it in order to aid me and nurture me and my personal artistic ideas. And that was the result of my like my final project on that. This was all live drawn, trying to simplify shapes, trying to make things interesting and see how that could be part of a children's book illustration, for example, or even a drawing illustration that Disney could use, let's say, for publications. So yeah, it was a very beautiful project to be part of. And this was me at Parsons doing my thesis presentation. And this was something I partnered with a friend of mine who's also here, Pablo Gomez. As you can see, his name is, this is a children's book. He read it, and he also, he wrote, and he also created music of each chapter. And what I did is that I illustrated the very first book of this amazing adventures of Lulito. And I also participated in many shows. One of the shows that I was able to participate reflected New York City's melting pot activity. And this piece was called The Melting Pot. It's actually the Manhattan Island. And as you can see, it's created by many different faces. And all of these faces were just people that I probably saw in the streets, that I remember, that I had in sketchbooks, and I just planned to put in there and fit them there, having fun with the shapes. It doesn't matter if it felt like a human face or not. I tried to create that anatomical aspect of it. And I truly had a great time there. I feel like Parsons allowed me to express myself, allowed me to step feet on different waters and understand what other languages and art could be explored. Then after I graduated, I felt that there was something I was missing. I felt like I really wanted to pursue something that was not there yet. I wanted to become an educator and an artist. And this was not there yet. I felt like the doors were not open also for me as a migrant artist who didn't know anybody in New York City. So I graduated Parsons. And after that, I married my husband, my today's husband, the day after my graduation. And that was a way for us to, finally support each other as young adults and be together. He's also an artist, and we wanted to make it official. So we got married, and he said, "Hey, let's give you. Why don't you go to study and do your master's? I think it would be amazing. You have all the creative opportunities to do that." And I was super grateful for him. He started working out while I was studying, and that was some part of my life that it's very common for all migrants. You know, you are first generation in the city, you don't have any other to rely on, no parents, no grandparents, no cousins. So it's like a big deal for you. And I live there, I have cousins, but they're far away from me. So that's, you know, it always comes into play that you need somebody to rely on. And I went to the New York Academy of Art, like Lara mentioned. At the New York Academy, I completely forgot about illustration. And it's not like I forgot it, I keep it in the back of my brain. And I started really studying art in a more classical manner. And I was completely happy about that. I wanted to become an artist that knows her, understands her profession, understand the basics of creating art. And at the New York Academy of Art, oh, I think I shouldn't. I may have pressed the wrong button.
See,
I'm sorry.
it's all good.
Yeah. So there at the New York Academy of Art, oh, there you go, I point you the other way.
that.
Yeah, thank you. I explored more understanding the figure. So the New York Academy is an art school where you learn figurative drawing. It's focused on figurative drawing. So I learned how to create human body through understanding anatomical structures. I feel like I become a doctor in a way, because I even went to a morgue. I started studying the human body with professors. It was just all interesting. And over there, I understood that the reason I was lacking in my own artistic creation is because I was not studying or understanding my subject matter. And as you can see, I did so many self-portraits. If you can find myself in some of them, I kind of see them. But I also went back to some of illustration, kind of trying to understand and remember that language. And when I say language, I mean the shapes, the colors, the beauty of how it's built, but also trying to keep it more classical than understanding the figure. Then I went back to my thesis when I went to Altos de Chavon, going back to the ink work, going back to and mixing it with the human body. And it was something completely beautiful to see how my work throughout the years changed and how the city changed me. I fell in love with all these mannerism and changes that I got while making my piece. Most of my art is related to body image, identification as a woman, my experiences through what I think the body is. And as you can see in the very beginning of my inks, they were really sad. They were a little bit like gory and they had grotesque aspects of it, but I kind of started changing and went to a more happier and lovable place and those creations. And I'm not sure if it's because I was more happy with myself and my life in New York City. Some of the thesis work I created as when I was there. And when I went to the Academy of Art as well, I realized that all these knowledges I know and all these concepts I know could be taught somewhere out. And it had not, I didn't have the right to keep it for myself. And since I really love to teach, that was my studio over there. I told my husband, hey, why don't we create something to give workshops in the Dominican Republic? Why don't we do something that we can share all these beautiful concepts, all these beautiful techniques, and tell them, hey, there is another option. Back in the DR, art is good, is really strong, but it's limited, you know. And art professors are also a little bit limited in their knowledge. Dominican Republic is kind of like a new country, and having all these knowledges and not having professors that actually can share them was a little bit sad when I was a student. I kind of wished I had all these knowledge way before I entered, I came to New York City. I probably have been a different artist, but at the same time, I cannot complain. I think that everything I learned over there shaped me and built the person I am today and the artist I am today. And that's how Art Trip NYC started. As the name says it, Art Trip NYC, it's a school that we created in order to teach classes in New York City for Latinos. It was mainly in Spanish, and we fell completely in love with it. We had no resources, we had no money in order to make this happen, but we had a lot of friends. We had a lot of beautiful supporters that were willing to either give us a hand, share us a studio space, or give us ideas, or even work with us through those days. And we made it happen. Art Trip NYC brought a nice group of students to New York City, Dominican students, no matter their age, no matter their gender. And we went to parks. We built this landscape drawing workshop, and we went to different parks. We went to museums. In the DR, there are not many museums with like the Met. It doesn't exist. All the art that's there, it's contemporary art. So we feel that giving these people the opportunity to experience what we experienced through 5 years of learning, by that time I had 5 years exactly in New York, was something gorgeous and great. And after the 2 weeks, there was a 2-week program. After the 2 weeks, we ended up making a beautiful show of their creations. And it was just really, really nice to have that. We made some money and we gave it to the professor. We didn't keep anything. We probably just kept whatever we spent and invested, but we gave it to him because that was another thing. We gave him the opportunity to teach a workshop in New York. He did not have any option. He worked for a very famous school in the Dominican Republic, but there was no option for professors to grow as well. And we gave him that option. He was an amazing person, and he collaborated every day with us. It was the very first trip he made with his family. He took the opportunity also. So we felt very happy that we gave opportunities, not just for the students, but for somebody else. He sadly passed away a year after this beautiful experience. And we felt like it was just the time that we made something emotional and everlasting for his family. That being said, we stopped. We thought it was not going to work without him, but that actually was a lie, because we felt that that project should have lived longer. So we went to the DR and gave a beautiful workshop with a very big group of students. It was just gorgeous. This time we taught the classes, and it was just a 4-day workshop. Again, we were trying to encourage these people from the Dominican Republic to have a class that they were possibly not able to do in person. And our model also, what we try to do is that, why don't we bring a model from New York to the Dominican Republic and have that cultural exchange? And we paid for the model's fee. We gave him a place to stay. And as you can see, that house, we also got the opportunity to be able to have it and it was very affordable for the students as well. So we only charged for that, and we also offer them food. It was just like a big masterclass experience. So yeah, having the opportunity to go to many other places in the DR, like Italian Center, we offered them the workshops and they loved it. They charge us a very small amount of money in order to have the workshops there. And as you can see, that's Augusto displaying with all the drawings that the students create and the paintings, and giving them some feedback. Then we went to the National Fine Arts Institution in the Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo, and we gave also a beautiful masterclass. It was a 1-day workshop, but we had such a great time. I felt really sad because many of these students were like, wow, I had no idea I was able to create a portrait like this in one day. And I was like, but you have all the skills. And they were like, yeah, but my professors don't, we do this in a whole semester, one portrait in a whole semester. And I was in shock. So we keep the life of Art Trip NYC. We may change the name because it's not in New York City anymore. But we are very interested in teaching abroad as well, not just in these two countries, but these are the places where we have the most opportunity to connect with. After that pandemic hit, we thought it was all over. And many artists encourage a lot of people to do live streams, which I thought that was a great opportunity to connect again with people. And as you can see, we had drawing sessions with models who were kind enough to give us 1 hour of their day to post online and have people from all over the world to join us. And we tried sharing that online. It was gorgeous. Some people donated, and their donations went through the model's time. And even other artists wanted to join us in live streams while they were making art. So I felt like seeing at everything I'd been doing in my life as an artist shaped me, and how being in such a dynamic city shaped me to be proactive and create things. I went back to my artistic artistic side and created also different posters for Instagram, where you could see Augusto and me sharing our drawing skills on how to draw the figure portrait, the human portrait. It was just really fun. And on 2021, we tried to go back to the DR. That was the very last in-person Art Trip NYC class we did, and it was very short in terms of the dates and in terms of the amount of students. We had to respect people's the spaces, and they had to have a vaccination card and everything in order to make that happen. But it was fun. It was very fun. And in pandemic, I had the opportunity to become a professor, online professor for Altos de Chavon, where I graduated back in my bachelor's in the DR. And I thought it was the best opportunity to share everything I learned and all the things that I had wanted to share with young students and young students in the DR. So the workshop or the class was called Analytical Drawing, and I was preparing the illustration students on this journey. I always said that my students were going to be the best draftsmen because they were going to learn so many interesting things. And then I also was teaching at FIT. I was teaching at FIT on 2022. And that's when it started. It's been a long trip, and it's been a beautiful trip. I was then pregnant at the time, and I was teaching online pregnant, teaching in person pregnant. It was all fun and interesting. My students were all the time carrying me and helping me around. They were like, wow, I thought this was never going to happen. Even FIT told me that I was the very first professor who was pregnant. and I was afraid of sharing the news because I didn't want to lose my job, but they accepted me so kindly and warmly, and I was very happy. All these misconceptions of being pregnant and by myself in the city in a way. So yeah, after I delivered my baby, I stopped for a while. This is him. He had 2 months on that drawing, and I became a mother. My next creations after his 8 months of life began, and I'm lying. This I created while I was pregnant. And that's because pregnancy just gave me so many beautiful inspirations on creating new art, new concepts. And that whole series of painting is still a work in progress. These 2 beautiful paintings were at Italy, one in Venice and another one in Tuscany, Florence. And I was just really happy that this new chapter of my life as an artist and as a human kind of developed and went overseas for the very first time. Okay, I'm closing. This is one of the same series, and these are pieces that I still are in part of my family, my husband's family, our time as a family now. I'm still creating, I'm still making art. It's been a roller coaster of things, but this I keep doing my ink series and my oil painting series. And as well, all the new things I've been working on. We have open studios on our, we have a studio on Spanish Harlem, or El Barrio. That's where we live. We also make murals, sometimes here and there. And I'm also tattooing, which is something I completely thought it was gonna be crazy, but trying and testing a medium like that was really encouraging. Most of my students are tattoo artists, and they encouraged us to become, to also try it out. This is one of my latest shows I created we created last year, and it's part of a group of tattoo artists as well. We managed to make a nice show in between fine artists and tattoo artists. We are all creators, and we like to make pieces. So we were like, why don't we make this opportunity? It happened in Chelsea on November, and it was really, really beautiful as well. And thank you so much. I am migrant artist, and I get a result of a lot of things that happen in New York City every day.
Yes, we'll open up now for comments, questions, or feedback. Elena, will you take a seat? It'll be you and I.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Oh, hands already. Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
First of all, thank you for this very impressive and inspiring presentation on your work. I'm just curious to hear about what the biggest challenge was for you when you first came to New York for your studies.
Obviously, this seems like a really fast and fun ride, right? But yeah, I thank you for asking that. I wanted to tackle that. I was really depressed in the beginning. That's why I said people like Laura and many other friends and other professors were a big pillar in my path when I came here. My mother came with me. She stood a long time with me. And then she was like, okay, there you go, have fun, and pushed me. And I was like flying and not sure where to go, right? But one of the things that really stroked me was that I had to get a job as a student. And I didn't do that in the beginning. My parents, they were very fair. They helped me a lot. But then after that, I had to work on my own to keep it going. I was lucky that I had that scholarship. I received a grant, and it was all very crazy, but I feel like I'm a very positive person at the same time. So my mental state also aided me in order to keep it going. I have friends from Thailand, from Korea, and they felt like family in a way as well. So yeah, I feel like being in a nice environment with people that support you was a key point for me. Thank you.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, thank you so much again. I really like all the art that you showed. I think it's super unique, and very cool. And I guess kind of going off of that, I was just wondering how or if your move to New York City kind of changed your perspective of what you want to show throughout your work. And obviously, like you said, new cultures and people that you met, kind of how that influenced what you wanted to portray in your work.
Whereas,
Yeah. No, absolutely. So one of the key elements of coming to New York is that I was exposed to museums and art shows, many art shows. I visited every Thursday. There is still a thing, but after pandemic, it became a little bit awkward. But I went to all these big artist shows every Thursday in Chelsea, the Chelsea Art Walk. And being exposed to that made me realize I am so behind, or I am so locked in something I thought was art, and just experiencing that, going to art fairs, and even taking trips. Like I went to Miami. I had some pieces presenting in Miami art fairs during the Art Basel week. And okay. And that was.
She's okay. Don't worry. You can go ahead.
I should talk. All right. So that, and like I said, my trip to Florida and Disney, and many other, I also got a scholarship to have a workshop in Florence. I completely forgot about that. So that also shaped me in understanding and learning. I don't know if you guys know Alyssa Monks, but she's a big artist in the city, and she gave that workshop there. So I felt completely, stoked and happy to have all these opportunities in order to develop my artistic and knowledge and my language in which what I wanted to create. I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
And we had one more question over here.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask about your time in the Dominican Republic and New York. Early on in the presentation, you said that the Dominican Republic, much like New York, is a little bit of a melting pot.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask if that's been or if you view that as a continuous theme in your artwork, and how does it manifest?
Absolutely. Yeah, and separating New York from the DR. DR is a melting pot, but it's not the type of melting pot New York is. I feel that we have created our own identity and everybody just follows it. Otherwise, then in New York, everybody keeps them. And you can see it everywhere. You go to Chinatown, people keep their own culture. You go to Koreatown and people keep their own culture. You go to Spanish Harlem or El Barrio, and we still have our own, you go to 116th Street, or if it's 125, where the African, community is. So there is just a big, massive change. And people we accept each other and we respect each other. But in the DR, people just follow one specific identity and culture. And yes, that completely is still part of my own creations as an artist. I feel like I'm starting actually to become much more inspired by my country now than I used to when I was starting in my artistic career. And that could be because I'm becoming a little bit more homesick. But at the end of the day, I also understand and try to feel the power of my culture as well. So that's why I'm starting to use that in my own work right now. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Well, again, we'll have more time in just a moment, so please join me in thanking. Thank you. And so, as mentioned, this space tonight is really, it's a celebration of how we understand gender justice beyond borders, and we've now learned this from two amazing artists. And also, as part of the event, we created a call for expression for those that are interested to share their work, and just very briefly use this opportunity. That's what this forum is about, to have this open space. So we have one more person for us to share some of the work very, very briefly. So, and then we will have time for more food, for more networking. So I hope that you will all stay with us. So we'll make that transition in just a moment.
Perfect.
And then we're on. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Sorry. Yes. Once again.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Landry Okwawoi. I'm from Kenya, and I serve in different capacities, born and raised in Kenya, educated between England, Uganda, and now living in New York with my husband, Jeremy. I resonated with Eliana. She spoke about her move to New York and the depression. I moved in 2020, in the height of COVID, to a very different landscape, being in New York at that time. And as I said, I serve in 3 different capacities. In New York, I serve Kenya in the United Nations Security Council as an advisor. In the office of our president, Human Rights Advisor, I serve as a director of global affairs, so we link everything we do here. And why I'm here today is my little legal bureau based in Kenya, and we work on gender justice, and it's called Craving Million Co. And what we do is enhance access to justice for women and children by leveraging technology. And we use publishing, forensics, and we focus on publishing to disseminate our messaging, because a lot of the work is very technical. So thank you for having me today.
Of course.
And as we begin, I'll play a little trailer of our documentary just to give you a direction of what it is that we do.
One of the major issues, and it's a holdover from sort of colonial Victorian, is the issue of sexual preference in many African countries. In Kenya, to be gay, the LGBT community is illegal. They just want to have equal rights, the same privacy and equality as all other Kenyans do. Is that something that you aspire to for your country?
I want to be very clear. I will not engage in a subject that is of no, it is not of any major importance to the people and the Republic. And this is not an issue, as you would want to put it, of human rights. This is an issue of society.
All right, we want to go back to that disturbing news about Moi Girls School in Nairobi, and reports reaching us say there has been a rape incident at the school. As we speak, furious parents at the school demanding explanation.
An enumerator is recuperating in hospital after she was gang raped last night. Police say she was attacked by 3 people after she was dropped home. Nyanza Regional Commander Vincent Makoha says 2 people have been arrested in connection with the incident.
Many people associate church or any place of worship with safety, peace, and higher religious ideals. But what would you think if right inside the holy walls, a so-called man of God defiled a 9-year-old girl? That is just one of the many stories of young girls in various parts of this country.
A 7-year-old girl is undergoing treatment after she was allegedly raped by 2 teenage boys in Eastleigh.
The incident raises concern over the increase in defilement cases in the area amidst challenges in delivering justice to the victims owing to community interference.
Well, you might remember the bizarre story of the men in Kamahuha area of Moranga who violated a donkey. Well, Residents and pastors in Murang'a County held prayers over the bestiality incident, hoping to cleanse the area. Charity Kimani has more on that story.
Aliniuliza naenda wapi, alinigonga na hiyo panga, nikaanguka. Nikienda kuanguka ndio alinisukuma, nilisikia miguu za watu wengi wakikuta nikiwa hapo chini. Kitu nyingine nilisikia ni mtoto wangu akiscream, na ile kupigwa, nilianza kupigwa sasa, lakini nilisikia sauti za hao watu na niliwajua. Na kutoka hapo vile nilipigwa, nikiamka nilijipata nimebeba, niko kwa barabara pale juu.
Pia polisi kwa jumla tuweke ukali kando, tuwe friendly kwa wale victims, ndio uweze kupata enough ingredients za kwenda kotini.
Who is looking out for the survivors post the case and everything that goes on?
I've been able to forgive. I don't know them.
Thank you. So that's just a snippet on our little documentary that was viewing how the court system provides synergy to eradicate violence against women and men. And with all those heavy topics, it was difficult because whenever we do research, it's harder to get the message. And as I mentioned, disseminating it to the public. So with this, I'll just read a very short excerpt from a judgment from Kenya before I delve into what we do and why we write these books. It's an excerpt from a former judge of the High Court, and he's called Justice Said Chitembwe. And it says, she seemed not to have been complaining about the incident. She had only gone to the appellant's home to have sex, only for her brothers to interfere. Children are not supposed to enjoy sexual intercourse, although the public will frown upon an adult who engages in sex with a child. We should not forget that circumstances have changed, where a 13-year-old girl behaves like an adult and willingly sneaks into men's house for purposes of having sex. The court ought to treat such a child as a grown-up who knows what she's doing. And this judge went ahead to describe this 13-year-old girl as ripe of age in the case of defilement. And that was just one of the clear representations of how insensitivity and retrogressive cultural practices and gender stereotypes impact the corridors of justice in Kenya. And so we set out to, am I doing it right? Oh, it's still. Sorry. So as I previously mentioned, Kravin and Co is a legal bureau positioned to uphold the rule of law and access to justice by leveraging technology. We do this reform and intervention by courtroom litigation, training, research, forensics, and boutique publishing. So we got published by IAPCC, our publishing certification, international IAPCC in Canada, just because we were working on very heavy topics that were unable to disseminate and educate the rest of say, I don't want to say layman, but it wasn't anyone who understood legal jargon. So the book is called Our Broken Silence, and it's a book by myself and my co-author Adele Onyango, who is a media personality in Kenya. And we did it in the form of diary entries. So what that documentary was, and we worked with the Judiciary of Kenya and the Kenya Judiciary Academy to kind of compile all these harrowing stories and figure out what type of reform the judiciary was going to work on. But to discuss that type of reform with anyone in Kenya, we call it, say, the mama mboga, the ladies who sell vegetables, just anyone in any language. The book is in English and Kiswahili. We decided to do it in the form of diary entries. dating back to pre-colonial Kenya, because we had been discussing the myth of decolonizing gender-based violence. And we're trying to figure out, as Kenya colonized by the British, what we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn about what we've been taught about this. So we got diary entries by victims, those who would say they're victims, survivors, observers, family members, activists, nurses, and tried to get the different issues surrounding accessing justice. So that's from the law enforcement officers, nurses, and we wrote it in very colloquial language with our slang, which we call sheng, and it was in a very simple way to ensure everyone understood what we were trying to portray, because we had done our work on institutional writing for judiciary, and we now needed to do it for the masses and society, because one of the biggest gaps in accessing justice is the mentality within the society. So the book got a lot of support. It was launched by our Chief Justice, the first female Chief Justice, Honorable Martha Koome. We had a lot of media personalities as well coming through for it. And before the book, there was a research, as I mentioned, and it was called the Trauma-Informed and Community-Led Bench Book, a one-way ticket to justice reform in Kenya. And as I was listening to Alex and Eliana, I thought that I understand why the universe didn't let me draw. For everyone's eyesight, they let me write, because it was a safer medium to go through. So we wrote the research in very technical and legal jargon, and we now tried to not water it down, but ensure that everyone could sort of work with us. And through this research and the book and finding the gaps, we've now trained 1,250 judges, magistrates, and our qadis who Kenya has Islam for some of our cases in Sharia law. And the first group we trained was the Supreme Court of Kenya, with the 7 judges sitting. We identified a lot of other aspects that we found issues with, like the insensitivity. And so we got into something called therapeutic jurisprudence, and it's the first training in Kenya, the national training. After we read the book, we would pick up little aspects of what, when you go to report it to a health worker and it's late in Kenya, they'd ask you what you're doing there. When you'd go to the police, they'd then ask you, what were you wearing? When you'd go to the judge, they would then say, I guess we need to reduce the age of consent to stop hearing about defilement. So we found various angles within that therapeutic jurisprudence and figured out the mental wellness, and there's the detrimental effects of judiciary are not there. And we got that through the various people who wrote within our book. I'm trying to rush because of the time. Yes, and the main aspect of why we went into literature and figuring out how to ensure society reads these important judgments and rulings was because we wanted to identify what statements and language is used by the judges that reduces reporting, because it was a big thing. When those news items you previously saw are publicized outside, it reduces the reporting of multiple people. And we wanted to see, what are the judgments? Are they negative, mean, punitive, or judgmental? There's a case in Busia County of a defilement, a gang rape, where the magistrate asked for the men who gang raped the woman to slash grass. And they were let to go, which they didn't even have a day in court. They just said, oh, well, it's just that, let her slash grass. So we're trying to review the words by judges and see how it re-traumatizes or hurts access to justice. And through this, the trauma-informed judicial practices that we've introduced to Kenya after writing the book from a community level, where the entries were not just from myself or my co-author, we managed to, we can't say we've helped change the system, but there's a reform because the training is mandatory to the judicial, from all the way from the Supreme Court down to the Qadhi's Court. The consequences of the insensitivity have been public outcry. Lately, there are protests in Kenya and femicide. Kenya, I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, the femicide rate has been very high. And one of the lady who initiated the protest is one of our contributors in the book. International scrutiny. The judge who I read about his case, they had to get him out of office because of international pleas. And I think they were not going to do it had they not gotten it. And he got an award in 2016 for that case. And I hope I pronounce it right. The Golden Legend Award in 2016 in Spain for the world's worst ruling for women's rights among 18 other cases. And now in Kenya, where there's a lot of lack of public confidence in the courts based on this. I won't go into that. So through this book, what we've been doing, I have the book here, but it's out on Amazon in case you want to read it. It's a very simple read. We've tried to ensure that there's empathy within the court, that access to justice is upheld, that judges are impartial, magistrates and qadis too. Through our national trainings, we try to carry small excerpts of the book to make sure they read the parts where survivors are complaining about what they've gone through in court. And we focus on the dignity of individuals through the court system. Because I think when you write a research or you're speaking from academia, it's very hard to grasp these things. But when you write it colloquially, it's different because at that point, you're speaking to everyone. You know, there's nothing on how much knowledge or education you have. I'm trying to skip. So we're trying to make a few strides, and these are some of the courts we've trained. We've mainly trained the Shanzu SGBV court. Through the public outcry, we now have a specialized court on SGBV. And we were the first, I'm very humbled by this, we're the first entity or company allowed to train them just after we launched the book. It's in Shanzu, it's by the coastal area where there's a lot of human trafficking and a lot of sexual violence. And we were able to focus on the same issue on trauma-informed training. And I think overall what the book was trying to achieve was how does a court system incorporate problem solving to understand the root cause of crimes or the sensitivity of it, and how does the court address the underlying issues which cause individuals to commit crime? Because again, that very rarely do you see mental health clearances or awareness on that. I'm just going to quickly, I know my time is up. I'm just going to quickly read one small excerpt for you before I finish. And yeah. So as I mentioned, the book starts from pre-colonial Kenya through research and anecdotes that we received. And it starts by what has changed since the 1900s. The choice to document the years of violence is a reminder of how prevalent it's been, with no effective regulation or reform. In the form of diary entries, victims, survivors, observers, family members, and others offer us a glimpse of gender-based violence, different perception. A society speaking out on their experience and those of loved ones. To write about trauma is to trigger unresolved or unrecognized trauma. The skeletons in my closet gradually began to pop out, which inadvertently pushed me to address my past and attempt to break my own silence, a painful, ongoing journey. And it additionally illuminated the misconception of the word gender and gender-based violence, a term automatically assumed to mean violence against women, which then usually explains the negative connotation in Kenya and derogatory comments such as, "What about the boy child?" And not all men do this. This often blinds society from addressing the issue sustainably and instead translates into a war of genders, gauging which gender is subjected to more pain or suffering. It isn't a war on gender or survival Olympics, it's a fight against the violation of rights. The negative connotation, sorry, I read the wrong part. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. I will skip it. Okay. I'll leave it for now, but I went on to say initiatives, through innovative, sustainable, and bold initiatives, gender justice will no longer be an idealistic euphoria. Initiatives bold enough to question the status quo and patriarchal institutions. Initiatives required to re-envision gender justice and go beyond the violations, and additionally focus on the plight and issues accessing justice. What does access to justice mean within the LGBTQ community in Kenya? What does access to justice mean in low-income households? These are some of the questions we hope to answer to gradually achieve gender justice. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mandy. I'm so happy that you reached out to us and that you responded to our call for expression. It's a fantastic addition. Are there any questions or comments on this fantastic work that is being done? Actually, no, that's for a moment. Why not? You know,
I ran out.
Yeah, no. Come on. The phone was going, everything was to me. We're just happy that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. Go ahead, Eliana.
I wanted to congratulate you on this beautiful and very, it takes a lot of hard work and it's really encouraging what you're doing and how you committed to it and went to expose this that's very cruel. It's also something that nobody, or not nobody, but people are afraid to talk about, right? It's something that also happens in my country. I feel like it's common in third world countries. It's that it doesn't happen in first world countries as well, but it's not very common. And I just wanted to congratulate you on that. I felt very connected with your fight, and it's just very beautiful that you are 100% diving into this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliana, for the comment. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Seeing those videos was so disturbing, and I'm really interested in hearing more about the process of extracting these tributes from individuals, because as your last quote explains, it's so painful to rehash this trauma. And I'm wondering where people became eager at the possibility of justice, or hesitant, or how was that experience?
I think speaking about it has been very groundbreaking, because it's taboo to speak about your experiences in terms of sexual violence, and it's embarrassing in our culture. So my co-author is a media personality who speak more about, I'm the reserved one. I'm one who writes more, and she'd speak more about it and encourage women. And I think what we need is to have more people speak out, because that's when the next person, and I guess that's how Me Too came up, is because you then hear the next person say, oh, it happened to me, because you find it as a safe space. So when we launched the book, we've been having group therapy sessions where we invite people, and it's a safe space because everyone there's a survivor, and there's no picture, there's no noting down names, it's anonymous, you register a different name. And it's helped us see more people willing to speak up. And we also have an anonymous app called the Rafiki app, where you get to speak to people on mental health and legal. So I think we're in the right direction. We don't have people saying everything that they want, but we're getting numbers of people. The data shows that more people are ready to speak out, and even in more aspects, seek justice.
Thank you so much. Full comments. Okay. Please go ahead.
Watching your presentation made me think of the quote, but it made you stronger. I didn't need to be stronger, I needed to be safe. And so was wondering what's like the most radical thing, if you were to just make anything happen, what's the most radical thing you can happen to ensure that more folks get the justice that they deserve?
And so many that are in my head. I don't think I can come up with one now, but wow, that's really hard. I might sound morbid if I say what's the most radical thing. Because of how the sentencing works, I think I'd wish that the government was a bit more punitive with those cases. So radical being up to death sentence for some of these things. In Kenya, death sentence doesn't even kill you, it just means life in prison. So I think I'd wish for life in prison for all of them. Yeah, that's the most radical that I would, yeah.
Now 3.
Okay,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Okay. When you're doing this work, do you share sort of what's going on in a global context? So other movements that have happened across the world that show how these stories can be really impactful and really empowering, and how that kind of sort of movement starts with people speaking and sharing their stories. And I'm just thinking about a documentary I just watched, and I had no idea that this was even a thing, but it was about Spain, and it was about their legal system when it comes to women who are trying to, you know, convict, or, you know, they're raped, and rape is seen as sexual abuse and not sexual violence. And there was such a difference in the sentencing there, and in the convictions, and it kind of is starting to be overturned, and there's some, you know, stricter kind of legislation, like what rape is. And it's not abuse, it's violent, just in and of itself, no matter the circumstances. And I was just blown away. This is Spain. So, I was just curious about that aspect of your work, like sharing kind of what's going on.
Yes, so we find, obviously, as a legal bureau, before going into publishing, our main aspect is research. And I don't know if you know about the egg skull theory so there's a book called The Egg Skull Theory, it's Australian. And that's the first time I realized that these issues we have in Kenya go beyond our jurisdiction. It's seen everywhere. And then obviously exposure to the Me Too movement was really big. And reading books like Vagina Monologues, and, you know, there's a lot that goes out that you realize. So in our culture, FGM is a very big initiation process, and I was really shocked that it's in America. And so we include this in this book, all these aspects I'm speaking of. And in the documentary, we go and discuss Italy. I think there was a ruling in Italy that said if you're in jeans, you don't get raped, you know? And the women have been protesting by wearing jeans. And we've got a lot of judgments from the States as well on aspects that have been said. And I think it's important for us to do that when we're training judges, to show that it's not just you that we're not just penalizing you, or because we're trying to do peer review. We just, by using the global scale, it's easier to understand that it's something societal rather than individual. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And where can we get your book?
Amazon.
Okay.
It's on Amazon. Thank you.
There were two other questions or comments.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, either one.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, because I think that personally this topic is very kind of scary to think about almost, and very like you said, a little taboo, like a little, I don't know, people fear away from it and just don't talk about it, which I totally understand why. And I think you put it in a very unique way, where you kind of use that fear as empowerment almost, and it's kind of almost like an important skill in order to move forward with this topic specifically. So yeah, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Comment, question, feedback. Yes.
Hi, I think it was a very encouraging presentation to hear about all the change you've been able to make. But it was also an interesting juxtaposition against how entrenched the prejudices and such have been in the way. I remember you also mentioned being either the only or one of the only entities who have been able to do this training. So I was curious what the process was like in trying to gain and succeeding eventually in gaining their cooperation.
Okay. So this documentary was done in 2017. And in the full documentary, that was a previous Chief Justice, not the lady I showed. And in the documentary, it's available on YouTube. I ask him a question and I say, is it possible for us to have SGBV courts? And this just tells you how difficult it is and how sexual violence is viewed as nothing in Kenya. He replied and said, if I give you a court for sexual violence, the bankers will want one, the tax, insurance, everyone will want their own court. And that just showed how little he doesn't see the magnitude of what it is to have gone through any aspect of sexual violence. So 2017, 2018, I think we released it in 2020. And then we had the research, but no one was willing to listen to us from 2018. And then we started lobbying within other CSOs and NGOs. And then we realized that judiciary don't like that. So we had to work with them directly. And the first time they sat with us to actually think about it was 2021. So that's 4 years since we started it. And after that, it's been a roller coaster because certain magistrates and judges also against it. So when they attended, they tried to belittle us or they tried to go against what we've been trying to do. So it's really difficult, especially with certain religious blocks in our country. But we're just happy to have our foot inside the door and try to get it done. So we try to block the noise of those who don't want to hear about it. Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe we will close the official Q&A now, because I also have a few concluding remarks, and then we can mingle a bit more over some food that is here. So again, join me in thanking Lanji for. And as mentioned, I just have a few words that I would like to share with all of you, since today marks the closing of the first Global Gender and Migration Forum. Okay, it was actually quite hard to write these concluding remarks, I must say, and I'm very happy to share this in this particular space and listening to these three very inspiring, motivational, and very, very deep contributions to our collective fight for gender justice beyond borders. And so as I'm still gathering my thoughts about this week, and I mean that in a very, very positive way, while I'm figuring this out, I figured let's just share some numbers. I am a political scientist at the end of the day. My work is mainly qualitative, but sometimes I like to think numbers also tell a story. So here are some numbers that I would like to conclude this first Global Gender and Migration Forum with. The forum brought together more than 700 registered participants in New York City and online from all around the world. The forum included partnerships with 5 academic institutions, 2 academic affiliated associations, and 3 NGOs. The forum featured more than 40 speakers, representing a range of stakeholders such as UN agencies, academics, policymakers, researchers, community leaders, artists, authors, and most importantly, migrants themselves. The forum included 7 different engagement formats, from roundtable and panel discussions to a community talk, community research fair, a special session, an innovative space, and today's art show. The forum came together in a record organizing time of 3 months. The forum was made possible by the tireless work of 4 migrant women, 3 of whom are migrant youth. So thank you, Carolina Cortez. Thank you, Diana Morrison. Thank you, Isha Mandal, with the support of our team at the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice. And the last fact, or the last number that I'll give you, is the forum is the first of many. And in fact, mark your calendars for the second Global Gender and Migration Forum, which will take place in 2026, also here in New York City and hybrid, aligned with the International Migration Review Forum. So I will leave you with these numbers and a heartfelt thank you for making the first Global Gender and Migration Forum such a success. Thank you.
Give Laura Suzanne a really big round of applause. She has been working hard. Thank you so much. And there's a lot of food, so please come and join us for food. There's also to-go plates, so please don't leave anything because it's spring break.